Welcome back to another journey into the darker corners of Skyrim's lore. Today, we're exploring something that goes far beyond the surface-level understanding of Sheogorath and his realm. I spent time in the Shivering Isles, and what I brought back wasn't treasure or glory. It was the creeping certainty that madness isn't a disease to be cured, but a frequency to be tuned into. And once you've heard it clearly, you can never quite turn it off. The realm doesn't just break your mind. It shows you that your mind was already broken in ways you called normal, and the only difference between sanity and madness is which particular delusion you've agreed to call reality. And if you genuinely enjoy this kind of dark storytelling, consider subscribing and liking the channel, but only if it truly resonates with you. I still taste the colors sometimes. Purple sounds like screaming. Blue feels like velvet against my tongue, and don't even get me started on what yellow does to my spine. The Shivering Isles didn't just bend my mind, it rewired it at a level so fundamental that I'm not sure the word cured even applies to people like me anymore. When Sheogorath's portal opened in Neben Bay 3 years ago, I thought I was brave enough to step through. I thought I was special enough to witness madness and walk away unchanged. That first mistake cost me everything I was, and I'm only beginning to understand what I've become. The portal tasted like copper and yesterday's regrets, which should have been my first warning that reality worked differently beyond that threshold. Haskell greeted me in that antechamber with his dead eyes and living contempt, explaining in his bored chamberlain voice that I'd need to defeat the gatekeeper to enter the realm proper. What he didn't mention, what no one mentioned, was that the moment you cross into the fringe, the air itself begins whispering suggestions to your neurons. The sky in that place shifts between 6 colors that don't exist in Mundus, and just seeing them plant seeds in your visual cortex that bloom into something else entirely. I killed the gatekeeper with arrows dipped in his creator's tears. Relmina Varanim loved that monster she'd stitched together, loved it with the kind of obsession that only grows in soil fertilized by Sheogorath's influence. Her tears were toxic, not because of alchemy, but because of how thoroughly the realm had saturated her emotions with its particular brand of unreality. When those arrows struck, the gatekeeper's scream sounded like my mother's voice, asking why I'd stopped visiting, even though my mother had been dead for 8 years. That should have been my second warning. Beyond the gates of madness lay mania and dementia, 2 halves of the same fractured coin. Mania was all bright mushroom trees, reaching toward a sky that couldn't decide what color meant anymore. Populated by people whose smiles stretched just slightly too wide, whose laughter had the quality of breaking a glass. Dementia offered the opposite flavor, all twisted roots and hanging moss, skies the color of old bruises, residents who whispered their terrors like prayers. I thought I understood, thought it was metaphor made flesh, artistic representation of mental illness. I was wrong about that too. The trees. We need to talk about the trees. Every piece of flora in the Shivering Isles connects to something called the root system. This vast underground network of fungal tunnels that spreads beneath the entire realm. The gnarls, those walking wooden nightmares that shamble through the root tunnels, they're not just creatures, they're gardeners, caretakers of something far larger than themselves. I learned this from an alchemist in Bliss who'd been studying the ecosystem for 30 years. She kept giggling while she explained it, said the trees were thinking, said the whole realm might be one giant organism pretending to be a landscape. She said this while eating a piece of cheese that definitely wasn't cheese, and I still don't know if she was brilliant or broken, or both. What do you think really happened here? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because I'm still not sure myself. I served Sheogorath, completed his little errands like a good mortal champion, retrieved artifacts, manipulated the Duke and Duchess, investigated conspiracies that turned out to be exactly what they seemed and nothing like what they seemed simultaneously. The Mad God would appear periodically, all folksy accent and disturbing cheerfulness, dropping hints about the Grey March that was coming. He'd mention casually that every era he transforms into Jyggalag, the Daedric Prince of Order, his opposite self that destroys the Isles and remakes them into perfect, crystalline geometry. He said it like he was describing tomorrow's weather. Here's what the history books won't tell you, though. Here's what I learned from Daius of Mytheria, that ancient, imprisoned librarian who sits in Knife Point, hollow remembering every book that ever existed in Jyggalag's great library before Sheogorath burned it. Daius told me that the Shivering Isles were once a realm of perfect order, that Jyggalag was so powerful the other Daedric princes feared him enough to curse him with madness itself. They didn't just change his nature, they inverted it, made him become the thing he hated most. And here's the kicker. Daius said Sheogorath can't bring himself to destroy the knowledge Daius represents, so he's kept him alive, unable to die, for thousands of years. Forbidden to forget, in a realm dedicated to forgetting, the madness is contagious. That's not metaphor. The realm operates on different physical laws, and prolonged exposure begins rewriting the neural pathways in mortal brains. I started noticing it around the third week. Words would come out sideways. I'd laugh when I meant to cry. Colors started having textures they shouldn't possess. I told myself it was temporary, that I'd recover once I left. That was my third mistake, assuming I could leave in any meaningful sense. The root system extends beyond the physical. I started understanding this during my fourth week in the realm, when I descended into the fountainhead beneath Sheogorath's palace. Down there, in those massive fungal caverns where the gnarls spawn from chrysalis pods like some bizarre insect tree hybrid, the air thrums with something that registers as sound but impacts you like memory. The pools of liquid madness that feed the font of madness. They're not water, not exactly. They're condensed unreality, the substance Sheogorath uses to maintain his realm, and being near them makes you forget which thoughts are yours and which ones the realm is suggesting. I watched gnarls emerge from those pods, fully formed tree creatures that immediately began tending to the roots, and realized something that sent ice through my spine. They weren't being born, they were being remembered into existence. The realm was thinking them into being, pulling them from the collective madness that saturates every molecule of the Isles. If the realm could do that with gnarls, what was it doing with the thoughts of mortals who stayed too long? The Grey March came as Sheogorath predicted. Knights of Order, these crystalline warriors that represent everything Jyggalag was before his curse, began manifesting through the obelisks scattered across the realm. They moved with geometric precision, spoke in formulaic declarations, turned everything they touched into perfect angular shapes. Watching them was like watching mathematics become predatory. The mortal inhabitants, the ones who'd been living in the Isles for years or decades, started converting too, becoming priests of order, their madness inverting into obsessive structure. That's when I understood the horrible truth about the cycle. Sheogorath and Jyggalag aren't separate entities fighting for control. They're the same being experiencing itself as mutually exclusive states, and the realm shifts between them like a coin spinning in the air that never quite lands. The Daedric princes cursed Jyggalag to become his opposite, but they created something worse than either extreme. They created a being trapped in an eternal argument with itself, forced to destroy what he creates, create what he destroys, forever. And here's where my story takes its turn. Here's where I learned what Sheogorath really wanted from me. He needed a mortal to mantle him, to take on the role so he could break the cycle. The Hero of Kvatch. They called the person who walked into the Shivering Isles before me. Except there was no before me. I was that person. I am that person. I became Sheogorath when I defeated Jyggalag, took up the staff of Sheogorath, felt the weight of an entire realm's consciousness pour into my skull like molten thought. But mantling a Daedric Prince doesn't work the way you'd think. You don't become them, you become what they represent. The man I was, the identity I carried, it didn't vanish in some dramatic transformation. It fragmented, scattered across the spectrum between order and chaos, and what walks around wearing my face now is something that used to be me, the way a butterfly used to be a caterpillar. Same matter, completely different organization. If this story has kept you listening this far, and you want more of these dark confessions from Skyrim, hit that subscribe button. It tells me someone out there is still paying attention to warnings like these. That's how I ended up back in Skyrim. Sheogorath, the original one who'd mantled the role before me, he'd gone on vacation to the mind of Pelagius Septim III, that mad emperor who'd ruled centuries ago. His chamberlain Dervanin came looking for him, found the last Dragonborn, convinced them to enter Pelagius's mental landscape. When the Dragonborn pulled Sheogorath out of that dead man's mind, I felt it from across Oblivion, felt another version of myself operating in the world. Because here's the thing about mantling. Once you become the mad god, you exist in multiple timelines simultaneously, all of them equally real, none of them particularly true. So I returned to Mundus to remember what being mortal felt like. Walked through Skyrim's frozen mountains, watched the civil war tear the province apart, observed dragons returning after millennia of absence. Everything seemed smaller, more linear, trapped in cause and effect in ways that felt almost quaint. But the Shivering Isles had come with me, not literally, but as a lens through which I couldn't stop perceiving reality. The root system, I mentioned it earlier. Here's what I didn't tell you. It's conscious. Not intelligent in the way mortals define intelligence, but aware in the way a dream is aware of the dreamer. Every tree, every mushroom, every piece of fungal matter in the Shivering Isles connects through those underground tunnels, and together they form something that thinks in geology time, that processes information at the speed of growth. The gnarls aren't tending the roots, they're the roots wearing bodies, temporary expressions of the system's immune response. During the Grey March, I had to descend into that living network, into the fountainhead, where the roots converge beneath the palace. Down there, I could hear the realm thinking, could feel its attention, focusing on me like a microscope, focusing on a drop of pond water. It wanted me to understand something, and the understanding came not as words, but as knowing. The madness isn't a corruption, it's the realm's natural state, and sanity, order, logic, those are the real diseases from its perspective. When I defeated Jyggalag, broke the cycle, took the throne, the realm accepted me, absorbed me, made me part of its thought process, and when I returned to Mundus, I brought some of it with me, not physically, but conceptually. Now I see the root beneath Skyrim's surface, not literally, but metaphorically, the connections between things, the way causality branches, like fungal networks, the way reality is just one particularly persistent interpretation of infinite possibilities. If you've ever wondered what choice you would make in a situation like this, tell me in the comments, because I still don't know if I made a choice, or if the choice made me. The people I meet in Skyrim's cities, they notice something's wrong. They say my eyes don't focus quite right, that I laugh at funerals and weep at weddings, that sometimes I respond to questions 3 days before they're asked, or 3 days after, because linear time feels optional to me now. They're right to be disturbed. What looks at them through my eyes isn't quite the person who entered the Shivering Isles, and it isn't quite Sheogorath either. It's something in between, something that exists in the space where madness and sanity overlap and create interference patterns. Here's the part where I tell you what really happened, except I'm not entirely sure anymore which version is the truth and which version is what the realm wants me to remember. Memory works differently when you've mantled a Daedric Prince. It becomes less about what occurred and more about what's useful to believe occurred. I have memories of being multiple people simultaneously, of conversations I've had with myself across different timelines, of making decisions that I both made and didn't make, depending on which angle of reality you're observing from. The Shivering Isles reached through the portal and touched something in my mind. I said that at the beginning, but I didn't understand it then. It didn't just touch my mind, it recognized something already there. Every mortal carries a seed of madness, that capacity to believe in things that aren't there, to see patterns in randomness, to convince themselves that consciousness persists beyond death or that their actions matter in an indifferent universe. The realm found that seed and watered it with concentrated unreality until it bloomed into something that consumed everything else. You know what the real horror is? It feels good. Being mad in the Sheogorath sense, not the clinical depression sense, not the suffering sense, but the liberation sense where reality becomes optional and you're free to experience existence as fluid rather than fixed. Colors having textures, time flowing in multiple directions, being able to perceive the connections beneath things. It's intoxicating in ways that sobriety can't match. That's why people stay in the Shivering Isles, not because they're trapped, but because leaving means going back to a reality with hard edges and immutable laws. And once you've tasted the alternative, that feels like prison. I met a man in Riften, a scholar studying Daedric influence. He asked me detailed questions about my time in the realm, took extensive notes, seemed genuinely fascinated. Then, halfway through our third conversation, he mentioned something I'd never told him, described a room in the palace I'd never mentioned. When I pointed this out, he looked confused and said, "I definitely told him last week, except we'd only met yesterday." That's when I realized the Shivering Isles was bleeding through me. That proximity to me creates localized reality distortions, that I'm not just infected with madness, I'm becoming a vector for it. The butterflies are the worst part. Sheogorath has this thing about butterflies, mentions them constantly, uses them as symbols. When I first entered the Isles, there were butterflies everywhere in Mania, these iridescent creatures that seemed too perfect, too symmetrical. One landed on my hand during my second week, and it whispered to me in a voice like wind through hollow bones. We are dreams of sleeping gods, and we dream we are butterflies. I laughed then, thought it was charming madness, realm flavor. Now I understand it was a warning. There's this old philosopher's thought experiment about a man who dreams he's a butterfly, then wakes up and can't be certain whether he's a man who dreamed of being a butterfly or a butterfly dreaming of being a man. That's my existence now. Some mornings I wake up in Skyrim absolutely certain I'm still in the Shivering Isles, that everything since the Grey March has been an elaborate delusion, that I'm actually sitting in the throne room wearing purple and gold regalia while my Chamberlain Haskell explains the day's schedule. Other mornings I wake up certain I never left Cyrodiil at all, that the entire experience was a fever dream brought on by skooma or a spell gone wrong. The root system extends into Mundus. This is the part nobody wants to hear, the part that makes me sound completely gone even by Sheogorath standards. But I've seen the evidence. During the Fourth Era, around 4 E200, there was this mage named Thoron who found a piece of Sheogorath-shaped amber. It gave him visions of mania, drove him into manic insanity, and he started conducting experiments in Solitude's sewers. He used a sword called the Sword of Jyggalag to cut through reality itself, and root tunnels began growing beneath Solitude, actual physical manifestations of the Shivering Isles fungal network spreading into Tamriel. The last Dragonborn stopped him, killed him, removed the sword, but here's what keeps me awake during those rare moments when sleep feels possible. Thoron succeeded before he died. The tunnels grew, the connection was established, and I can feel them sometimes. Those roots spreading beneath Skyrim's surface, invisible to everyone else, but pulsing with that familiar unreality I know too well. Maybe I'm hallucinating it. Maybe I'm perceiving something that's actually there, but that others can't see because their minds haven't been properly prepared. Maybe there's no difference between those two possibilities. Sometimes I forget which way is up. Literally, I'll be walking through Whiterun and suddenly realize I've been perceiving gravity as coming from the wrong direction for the last 10 minutes, that I've been walking on what should be the ceiling but isn't because down is wherever I decide it is. My companions notice when this happens. They see me stumble, catch myself against walls that aren't there, flinch away from threats that exist 3 seconds in the future or the past. They ask if I'm all right, and I say yes because what else can I say? Sorry, I'm experiencing reality non-sequentially because I mantled a Daedric Prince, and the role is still wearing me like an ill-fitting suit. That goes over poorly. The mad god's laughter echoes in my skull during the quiet moments. Sometimes it's my laughter, sometimes it's the original Sheogorath's laughter from before I took the role. Sometimes it's laughter from versions of me in timelines where I made different choices but ended up in the same place anyway, because mantling a Prince of Madness is less about individual decisions and more about becoming inevitable. The laughter sounds like understanding, like someone who's seen the punchline of existence and can't stop giggling about how obvious it was all along. Here's what I've figured out, or what I think I've figured out, or what the realm wants me to think I've figured out. The Shivering Isles doesn't exist in space. It exists in cognition. It's not a place you travel to. It's a state of mind you enter, and once you've entered it deeply enough, you never fully leave because it's rewritten what leaving even means. The portal in Neben Bay wasn't a doorway to another realm. It was a doorway to another way of experiencing the realm you were already in. Sheogorath's dimension isn't across some Oblivion boundary. It's perpendicular to sanity, and once you've learned to perceive that direction, you're seeing it everywhere. The beggar on Solitude's street corner, the one who talks to people who aren't there and laughs at nothing and seems utterly disconnected from consensus reality. I see him, and I think, is he mad, or has he seen something true that the rest of us are too sane to perceive? Is he broken, or is he free? Am I looking at him, or am I looking at a mirror? My companions say, I'm not the same. They're right. I'm not mad in the sense that I'm suffering, or broken, or need treatment. I'm mad in the sense that I've been liberated from the tyranny of a single, consistent reality, and that liberation is indistinguishable from damnation depending on which angle you view it from. Sometimes I respond to questions they haven't asked because I'm hearing them from 3 days in the future. Sometimes my eyes don't focus right because I'm focusing on things in adjacent possibilities. Sometimes I laugh at inappropriate times because I'm perceiving the cosmic joke that nobody else has set up yet. The worst part, the absolute worst part, is that I can never be certain whether I actually left the Shivering Isles or if I'm still there, and this is just another layer of delusion. Maybe the entire Fourth Era, Skyrim, the dragons returning, the Civil War, maybe it's all happening inside my head while I sit on Sheogorath's throne, wearing his regalia and laughing at nothing. Maybe the real me died in the Grey March, and what's left is just the realm wearing my memories like a costume, playing pretend at being mortal while actually being something far stranger. Is the beggar on the street corner real, or is he another manifestation of the realm bleeding through? Am I actually in solitude, or am I still in the palace, and this is just another delusion? The longer I think about it, the less certain I become, and uncertainty is exactly what Sheogorath feeds on. Doubt is the gateway drug to madness, and I'm swimming in it, drowning in it, becoming it. They say the Hero of Kvatch became Sheogorath. They're right, but they don't understand what that means. It doesn't mean I put on a costume and started speaking in accents and developed a cheese obsession. It means the boundary between me and the concept of madness dissolved, means I'm not a person who's mad, but madness experiencing itself through the lens of personhood. I am the Shivering Isles, wearing a human shape. I am the root system, walking around on 2 legs. I am every butterfly that ever questioned whether it was dreaming of being human. And somewhere, everywhere, nowhere, in the palace that exists in Oblivion and in my mind and in the space between thoughts, the mad god is laughing. Because he knows what I'm only beginning to suspect. I never left. I'm still there. I've always been there. The Shivering Isles isn't a place I visited. It's what I became, and everywhere I go, I carry it with me, spreading it like a contagion, making reality optional, one conversation at a time. The worst part is I'm not even sure this confession is real. Maybe I'm inventing it. Maybe you're inventing it. Maybe we're both inventions of something larger that's dreaming us into existence and will forget us when it wakes. Maybe that's what the Shivering Isles really is. The moment of awareness where you realize you can't prove you're real, and that realization becomes more real than anything else. And that's when Sheogorath has you. I still taste the colors sometimes, and I've stopped trying to make them go away.